People are always talking about freedom. Freedom to live a certain way without being kicked around. Of course, the more you live a certain way, the less it feels like freedom. Me, I can change throughout the course of a day. I wake up and I'm one person. And when I go to sleep, I know for certain that I'm somebody else. I don't know who I am most of the time. I'm here at the Bushwick Aberdeen stop on the L train in a place that used to be known as the beer capital of New York City. It's a good thing I lost those 12 pounds. This is Exploring Mora, and this is Bushwick, Brooklyn. September 27, 2011, I landed in New York City, and I spent the next 3 weeks on a couch in Harlem. Every single day I would make the nearly hour-long train ride east into Brooklyn, and I learned firsthand just how hard the real estate market in New York City can be. At a near breakdown, I made a breakthrough. I disregarded Williamsburg, I disregarded Greenpoint, and I found myself here, off of the Halsey L stop on the L train. For the next 9 months, Bushwick was my home. Alright, so for Bushwick, you can access it through Williamsburg, and it is actually bordered in the northwest by Greenpoint, to the west by Williamsburg, to the north is Ridgewood, Queens, to its east is East New York, and to the south is Do or Die, Bed-Stuy. There you go. It's accessible through the J on the south, the L on the north, and the M running along its western border. It's a nice little triangle going on. Bushwick. Bushwick is one of the oldest areas of Brooklyn. It was first inhabited here by the Dutch after they purchased it from the Lenape Indians. It encompassed areas of Greenpoint, Williamsburg, and together that was known as the Eastern District of Brooklyn. In Dutch, Bushwick was pronounced Boshwick, and it means heavy woods. There's no better way to remind people of that name than by naming a bar after it here in Bushwick. So it's no secret that Bushwick is considered a land on the rise. It is what Williamsburg was 5 years ago, what the East Village was 15 years ago, what Soho was in the 80s. And no secret that that acknowledgement comes about because the rest of New York City, Manhattan, and developed areas of Brooklyn, you know, rent is only going one way, and that's up. Not to mention those areas are already being occupied by another group of people, homeowners. The grittiness of Bushwick that most transplants, including myself, take pride in comes from a long history of negligence. The years following World War II were especially hard on Bushwick, and the Kinder was building. In 1977, the blackout that struck all of New York City hit Bushwick the hardest. Storefronts were looted, buildings were set ablaze. All of Bushwick was on fire. The blackout on July 13th, 1977 only lasted 1 day, but the effects on Bushwick lasted nearly a half century. Within the year, 40% of all of Bushwick's retail and commercial establishments went out of business. An already poor neighborhood was left to fend for itself without any retail or housing buildings whatsoever. Con Edison referred to the blackout as an act of God. And on the first Sunday following the blackout, here at St. Barbara's Church on Bleecker Street, Father Gabriel Santa Cruz looked out at his congregation and proclaimed, "We are without God now!" So what happened? Well, Bushwick rebuilt, but it was at a slower pace. As buildings were going up, others were crumbling down and were inhabited. But over the past 10 years, Bushwick has added more than 500 new buildings, like these new houses, single-family homes here on Jefferson. More resources have been going back into the neighborhood. It was a breakdown that eventually laid the way for a breakthrough. Historically, Bushwick has been a culturally diverse neighborhood. First, the Dutch and the Germans came here, then the Italians, followed by African Americans, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, Ecuadorians, Colombians. Now there's a large Muslim community here, Chinese, there's also Taiwanese, Hong Kong, South Koreans, in addition to the transplants, just like myself, people who came from all over the country or the world and they couldn't afford to live in Manhattan or possibly Williamsburg. But I mean, now You can't pay me enough to live in Williamsburg. Being from California and being Mexican, when I first arrived here in Brooklyn, I thought Mexican food was going to be the hardest kind of food to find. And I had family members asking me if I could even find tortillas at a market. And it was to my surprise that I found a bunch of Mexican food restaurants in this neighborhood. In fact, a majority of them in Brooklyn are all in Bushwick. Like here, restaurant bar, but it goes by another name. Mesa Azteca Restaurant. For the past 2 years, it's been serving this area off of the DeKalb stop on the L. Let's go. So the tacos here at Mesa Azteca are cheap and they're delicious. And not to mention, look how cute they come. There's some good cactus. Buen appetito. So I used to call Bushwick the poor man's Williamsburg, but soon enough that nickname isn't even going to apply. You know that lovely lady that I mentioned in the other episodes of Greenpoint and Williamsburg, of that show that doesn't really have the name anymore, but we can't mention? Well, first name Jen, last name Gentrification. Yes, that's right. Lovely lady Gentrification is edging her way further eastward into Bushwick. In fact, so much so that there's new Italian restaurants, new Mexican food restaurants, new cafes, new yoga studios, 2 new bookstores, like this one, Molasses Books, right here on Hart and Knickerbocker, and soon enough, the largest beer garden in all of the 5 boroughs. This is the new Bushwick. Thanks, Jen. So I'm here outside of the crown jewel of Bushwick's revitalization, Roberta's Pizza, which is famous for growing its own herbs and vegetables in the garden next door. I could go on and on about health. Celebrities and famous people like Anthony Bourdain and Bill and Hillary Clinton have dined here and the whole neighborhood goes crazy. But I've never dined here. And the Yelp reviews range from either best pizza I ever had to overpriced waste of time. No, instead I've decided to focus on a couple of buildings right near Roberta's. Over the past year, I've understood Northern Brooklyn to be the 5th and quite possibly never-ending year of college. Everyone is overly educated, everyone is underemployed, and everyone has some sort of artistic angle. Exploring Mora is mine. And if Northern Brooklyn is the college, then certainly the dorms are the McKibben Lofts here on McKibben Street. Yep. 2 old textile factories that were built in 1936 and renovated in 1998 into build-your-own loft-style apartments. And they really are build-your-own, because I almost lived in one. Well, if I lived in there, I wouldn't have been able to stand up straight. And I don't know what would have bothered me more, that or the fact that there were giant water pipes running through the ceiling. Or maybe the fact that I wouldn't have a door. Either way, the McKibben Lofts are famous for all-night raucous parties, despite what the residents may claim, and apparently you can do whatever you'd like to do at these buildings, except, of course, sleep or concentrate. So Bushwick has changed quite a bit in the past 300 and something years, and in my own perspective, it's changed quite a bit in the last year itself. Bushwick may not have been my first love of Brooklyn, but it was where I went home to every single night. It was my home base, my landing zone in this borough. Yes, it was loud, it was gritty, and it seemed dangerous, but it was warm, and it was home. It's also a land on the rise, just like the rest of Brooklyn. This is Exploring Mora, and this is Bushwick, Brooklyn.